But what I want to talk about today is Steam reviews. Anyone can post review.
Well, I feel it's a bit of a cesspit of opinions and comments and
an echo chamber a little bit as well, right?
Bit of an echo chamber in terms of I've seen before games will not be launched yet, and obviously they've got their page and you can comment on it. Maybe the alpha or the beta has been released and it hasn't gone according to plan, or people just haven't quite vibed with it. And before the game is even launched, it's dead.
It can kill an indie game. You take a risk when you put your game in early access on Steam because it isn't finished, and you can say that as much as you want to people, but at least 50% of them are just going to ignore that, and they're just going to be like, well, this is the game, this is what I played, I didn't like it. Negative review, and then all of a sudden you go from mixed reviews down to like mostly negative, and then, you know,
I've even seen this, it's not just on Steam, but Metacritic as well. We're so inclined to look at a review and preemptively judge it before, personally, we've even played it.
You want to be able to come together to complain when something is bad, because that's how you make changes happen. That is a good thing that we have the power to do that. Do you look at reviews on Steam before you buy a game?
Personally, I tend to still go off the most old-fashioned word of mouth. I have a couple of friends who like very similar games to me. I've seen loads of them actually where it's like 1,200 hours, negative review, dead game. I get that it's funny because you're being sarcastic, but then that is a tick in the negative column. I'm just one in the millions of people who play games, but there's probably 1,000 more people making a similar joke. So then that all adds up. They're probably not intending to harm.
Someone that plays 1,000 hours, you would assume that they've had a good time playing the game. Like, even just from a numbers perspective, like the probability of them having a good time in that game over 1,000 hours is fairly high.
This is something like, you know, Apex, obviously.
Yeah, that's just that's just
an addiction.
That's just a bad time.
You know?
I think I've got around 3,000 hours in Apex, and I could say, you know, confidently, maybe 2,000 of those hours have been fun. But the 1,000 hours I didn't have fun with, pretty savage. If you're gonna spend that much fucking time playing the game, you've already made your point that you've enjoyed it. Yeah. Why play it if you're not enjoying it? Like, are you some sort of sadist?
It's also then your responsibility to, if you're going to dedicate that much time to the game and you want to leave a review, you need to leave a balanced and well-formed review.
You get some people that write those really nice long paragraphs are like pros and cons. And then you get somebody like the Shepherd guy who's just being Commander Shepard, and he's like, Commander Shepard approves this game.
They owe it to no one to write that review. But if they are going through the pain of writing something out, thinking about it, and even giving cons and critiques, fair play.
What about games that get unfairly review bombed? Resident Evil 4, there's a bunch of people who didn't like that they removed certain things from the game.
Oh, you pervert.
I don't think it's fair for them to go and then give that game a bad review just because of that. That's more review bombing, in that it's an unfair score that brings down the overall rating.
And could ultimately harm the performance of selling more titles.
The most egregious example I know of is Overwatch 2. That recently got put onto Steam, and that is now the worst rated game on Steam ever. Basically, there was the controversy that they haven't delivered on something they promised they were going to, and everyone was really excited about it. They've been talking for many, many years that PvE is coming. They spent all that time, and then like one day just went, we're not doing it anymore. I don't think it is warranted completely shit all over a game, make it the worst rated game of all time, because it is not. There are so many games that just don't even work on Steam. You can buy games on Steam that are like $200,000 and there's no gameplay. There is so much you can still get out of a game like Overwatch. It's a live service and a competitive game with an esports scene.
Call of Duty every year release their gameplay trailer or their cinematic trailer for the new title, and it's become a cultural meme for it to be the most downvoted video on YouTube. COD is such a titan, it's still going to get the tens of millions of views, and people are going to buy it. What do Steam reviews or just reviews in general mean for like the smaller indie devs trying to get their game off the ground? A review could make or break whether you sell a couple of copies, then your game can start taking off. I think it is a massively important part of the game's process.
There's no moderation to the Steam reviews. It would be too hard to moderate it.
Your game could be an amazing game, it could be a short game, but if you're an indie dev, you don't have a ton of cash to spend to overcome a PR shitstorm that could be a review bomb. How do you get past that if the community's dead in the water from day one because someone didn't like it, and then everyone follows the trend?
I look at the review scores, and if they are really, really bad, I might have really wanted to play it, and I went to the store to check the game out, and then I see that, and I'm like, well, maybe not. And it happens a lot on DLCs as well. A DLC might expand your experience of a game that you really, really love, and you'll play regardless, but sometimes DLCs don't have what people want in them, and it might be like 50-50, and then you kind of don't want to pick it up. But the games are your own personal experience. You really shouldn't look at reviews. There's plenty of films that I love that people say are really bad films.
You start to collect a couple of trusted areas that you'll go to, and I've completely dismissed the review section on Steam.
Misinformation sometimes happens. Doom Eternal came out, there was like a stuttering issue. There was a review that was really up the top, a negative review about how it was caused by the anti-cheat that they'd implemented, and it just like wasn't true. Even if you patch it the next day, that review's going to be there.
Well, that review is more evergreen than the patches. For an indie developer, you're not pushing out patches every week, and it's way more detrimental to an indie dev than, let's say, a AAA pub.
What happens with something like No Man's Sky, where the game comes out and it gets terrible reviews by people on the Steam platform, but over time it has improved massively. And I would like to see their curve of if they've reached positive reviews now. But like, is that good? Is that bad? Do we need that?
I think reviews are absolutely necessary, and we do need them. And bombing to an extent is needed to flare up the large issues and to make people aware that these problems do need to be fixed. Because sometimes they are really game breaking, and it's like really disappointing when you're so excited for something, you've kind of been sold something that it isn't.
A lot of people really hate the idea of DLC and in-game items, any kind of in-game purchases. There's almost like been this slow movement where it's become accepted now. But those are the kind of people who would go and review bomb a game for having like an in-game payment because they don't want it to happen, because it is their opportunity to use their voice to be like, we can't allow this, because if we keep allowing this, it's going to change games forever.
The review mechanic is there to give everyone a voice. Review bombing is a way of protest, in a sense.
Yeah, it is a way of protest, definitely.
Is this uniquely related to the games industry?
It might be uniquely related because that's something that can actively be changed upon release.
Every game is not perfect, right? And so everyone's going to have a qualm or a critique or a criticism for a specific thing in the game, but it shouldn't merit completely shitting on the game. There's more nuance to the review process.
One game that got review bombed massively was Death Stranding. It kind of got review bombed for just being Death Stranding, for just being like a
walking sim.
You have a game that, because of the people featured in it, Norman Reedus and Mads Mikkelsen and everyone else that's in it, the pedigree it has in terms of developers and Guillermo del Toro being involved, you have a game that hits all of the mainstream audiences, which is in some ways a style of game that they would probably not play. So they pick it up, they play it, and then they don't like it, and they review it badly. In essence, it's not necessarily a bad game, but it did get review bombed by people on Metacritic because of that.
Review bomb a game because it didn't necessarily gel with your expectation. Do you think gamers get too emotionally attached too early to a game before its release?
Oh, definitely. We get very attached.
And that has some impact on their review process, and in turn bombs because they were invested in didn't get that symbiotic relationship back.
You have to look at the guy who makes Minecraft, right? He started making a space version. He was very early stages, essentially. Everyone was like, this is going to be amazing, Minecraft in space. You're going to be able to do this and this and this and this and this and this. And he just stopped production after a while because he's like, you've all taken this and blown it way out of proportion for what it was going to be. And I don't want to work on this anymore because everyone's expectations are really high. I guess because maybe there's so much imagination involved in immersion in games. You put yourself in that character. I'm going to be flying through space, chased by bandits, and then pull up on a derelict ship and board them or whatever. So like,
yeah,
I think people get carried up. Whatever you just said.
Orange, you a saucy thing.
People would get carried away with the fantasy of games and the scenarios that they could be in. For Steam, I think you can just do a very simple thing. Approved reviewers and community reviews. And then you have approved score and community score. It's like Rotten Tomatoes do that.
I was literally about to say Rotten Tomatoes have got it. I think they've got it right. And we want that on the game side.
Yeah.
Has no one done that yet?
Nah, they're not going to
We'll
do
make
that,
our
are
own
they?
Steam.
They can't be bothered. When has Steam changed anything? It's been the same.
Can we call it Vapor?
No, we'll call it Meat.
Has Steam even changed in 20 years?
Well, they're coming out with CSGO 2. Which is the same
well,
thing.
yeah, because we needed that.
That might get review bombed.
It might get review bombed.